So, back in the day, there was a British horror studio called Hammer that made these great. I don't know what all else they went into, but the thing I really know them for is the Dracula movies they made with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. I only saw a few of them, and some of them weren't that great. But the original one they did, it's mainly just called Dracula. Sometimes it's called Horror or Dracula. Was awesome, and it's one of the quintessential Dracula movies. Probably right under Bela Lugosi's, even above Coppola's. So lately that studio has basically gone through a reboot, and they've released Let Me In and The Woman in Black. I don't care if the world turns against me, but I actually liked Let Me In better than the original Let the Right One In, which was, the Swedish, I think.
Something like that.
And The Woman in Black, while having its faults, was still really effective and had a lot of really good scenes in it.
Yeah, that's the reason I was really excited about this movie.
This is apparently the third one under that, unless there's one or two they've swept under the rug that we don't know about, but I'm pretty sure this is the third one since then. And this is the quiet ones. Apparently eagerly anticipated by quite a few people.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and like I said, horror is basically its own movie star. You don't need a star for a horror movie because the genre is the star. Well, okay. The story of this one, this story inspired by actual events, as comes up on the screen, as does for most horror movies now. Jared Harris is a professor that deals in, paranormal shit. And he is investigating this girl who might be possessed by a spirit named Evie. And he wants to do experiments for her and film it with his few of his students. Trouble is he can't get the funding. There was a whole scene about that when you had to go do maintenance in the production booth.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. That whole plot point didn't matter because even though he couldn't get funding, spoiler alert, he did it anyway. That's why we have a movie. And obviously, as you would probably suspect, as this movie goes on and reaches its climax, I think even the most gullible people will realize this is not based on actual events. Well, apparently the professor and some of his students were real, but none of the shit that happens in this movie really happened. So, it's about as heavy a fabrication as you can possibly get. Maybe, possibly, there's still people out there that are gullible enough to believe this. I don't know. There's still a few people out there supposedly that think what happened in Inglourious Basterds is really how World War II ended. So they're still out there.
Really?
Yes. So, and that's where the movie begins. And I got tired of this movie's bullshit really, really fast.
Yeah.
Let's start off with the fact that the other star in the movie besides Jared Harris is, I feel like I'm never saying his name right, Sam Claflin. That's a weird name to say. I don't mean to insult him personally, I have trouble saying it. He was Finnick, is his name?
Finnick Odair, I believe.
In the Hunger Games, in Catching Fire, and apparently the rest of them. Apparently a lot of the appeal of this movie is exactly what producers thought. They thought, we have this guy who was in the Hunger Games. If we put him in another movie, that's immediately going to get attention. Unless your name's Liam Hemsworth. But, and of course, you go online and you see all the comments, oh my god, Sam Claflin is in this, I want to see this because he was so great in the Hunger Games. Because I don't think impressionable teenage girls understand the difference between thinking somebody was great in something and just being in something.
Yeah.
They're basically saying, oh my god, it's Sam Claflin, he was in the Hunger Games, this movie will be great. It's basically, I think, with the way their minds work. And producers know this, unfortunately. I don't even remember much of what he did in the Hunger Games except save Josh Hutcherson's ass a couple times. Apparently he gets more important as they go. But I didn't even really remember his name until this movie came out. So, as the movie goes, it's pretty much kind of the same thing for about an hour and 38 minutes. And if you're not clued in, that's the entire runtime. This is one of those movies where, the great horror movies that have come out recently, there's The Conjuring, there is Sinister, and I guess you can kind of, it's not great, but I guess you can kind of throw in Oculus and The Woman in Black in there too. Mm-hmm. These movies have like an eerie setting, and just the atmosphere is like really dread-inducing, and it makes you just feel like something awful is going to happen. And every now and then, not like a lot or constantly, but every now and then there'll be a music. I talk about this in every horror movie because it's in every goddamn horror movie.
Yeah.
There'll be a little score happening, a music score, and then the music will stop for about 10 seconds, and then something will jump out and scare you, whether it's a music chord or somebody screaming or just a loud noise in general. I'm really sure Brick Tamlin made this movie and just screamed loud noises at the sound department. I say that happens every so often in the good horror movies. It's a pretty well-known fact now that the horror movies that don't really have anything else to work with because they don't really have any talent behind the camera tend to use the jump scares as every single scare they have. They have nothing else in their plethora of things they could possibly use in this genre. That's all they've got is loud noises. This is one of those movies. And I think it's worse here than I've seen in a long-ass time. I can't think of the last movie that just used that crutch so much. Like, they don't use jump scares as a crutch. They use jump scares as a wheelchair. For Christ's sake. It is literally every 5... I heard a review shortly before I saw it that said it was every 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, that means it happens a lot. No. It's at least every 5 minutes. If not even less than that. It might be every 2 goddamn minutes. I don't know. It was a lot. And I don't care. And that's the thing is... Okay. Maybe if somebody wants to defend the jump scare, they can say, well, if you jump, then they did their job. Whether it's, Well, here's the problem. Generally in horror movies, I think you're supposed to be afraid of what's on screen and not what the sound department's doing. I have to say this every time I review a horror movie, and they're probably just as tired of it as I am. So, that's the problem. And they use every single possible thing they can. I tried to note them all down. I couldn't keep up. There is when it's not the girl screaming, it's either they'll be talking and then suddenly the cops are at Jared Harris's door, but they knock really. I know they're the cops, but still they knock really fucking loud. So much so that it kind of sounds like a really loud music core. Whatever. There is a scene where the two of the students go in another room to do it, and we hear a very loud crash and a scream. And we're like, oh no, shit's going down. We know better, but the audience is supposed to say, oh no, shit's going down. They did it so hard they broke the bed. That was the big scare. There's a couple... Okay. So, obviously, the plot is they're filming this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so every time, like, when you see movies being made, you see the clapboard that says, like, take whatever on it, and that's how they distinguish what's what. Of course, when you don't have that, you just clap your hands together like that. And that's how he does the takes, obviously. There, not once, maybe twice, it might have been 3 times. Absolutely, at least twice. There are scenes where they want so badly to put that jump scare in there, but there's literally nothing in the scene that they have to use. It's like they're just searching desperately. What in this scene can make a really loud noise? They have absolutely nothing. So you know what they do? They play a really quiet scene, whether it's Jared Harris talking to the girl, or the one kid talking to the other kid and making conspiracy theories about Jared Harris's character, which we'll get to. The movie almost took an interesting turn, but fuck that. It'll just be a really quiet scene, and there'll be nothing whatsoever to disrupt it. And what happens? We suddenly cut to one of these scenes where he's clapping his hands. And they use that as the jump scare. And here's the thing. This shows the desperation, okay? I would understand if the next scene was them filming.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's why he claps his hands at the start of filming. We see it through the video footage of him clapping. And the scene goes immediately to something else that is not them filming. That clapping was just thrown in there because they hadn't made a loud noise in 2 minutes.
Nope.
I swear to God.
I'll buy that.
And it happened twice. Twice. Look how dark I wrote that and underlined it. Twice!
That's even better.
And they use it again at the end, by the way. And another thing is, I talked about how a good thing that found footage movies do is they don't have a score. So they can't do that shit. But the problem is for some reason, this video footage apparently has a score. I guess the 4 people working on this project managed to hire an orchestra before they showed this footage to people. So, it's like when you go see Nosferatu in a theater and they have the orchestra right in front of you. And that's the problem, is the really great horror movies use the atmosphere and, the genuine stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there are scenes in this movie that could have worked, but absolutely none of them do, because not a single one scene can go without doing that. And it just so... Here's the thing. We were in there with, there were, not to be sexist here, but this is just the way it goes. There were, 6 girls in there.
Mm.
And you know the way girls are when they watch horror movies, most of them anyway. Or at least the people that would come to this movie is what I mean. They're there to shriek, basically, whenever something even remotely somewhat scary happens. All these jump scares were happening left and right. The movie was trying so hard to get our attention. It's like they thought that we weren't paying attention. They were saying, hey, don't forget we're here. Even these girls were bored.
Mm-hmm.
It was just nobody... The jump scares would happen and nobody would even react anymore. It just got really boring.
Yeah, it was bad.
It's just really loud. Oh, you did that again. Cool.
How long do we have left?
Oh, God! Oh, no, they did it again. And it's just constant. For 98 minutes. It's the, that's the problem. You might want to be aware of that if for some reason you see this. When 13 Ghosts came out in 2001 or 2002, it was a widespread thing. Audiences and critics all complained to the theaters playing 13 Ghosts that the sound was too loud, so much so that it actually physically hurt. Apparently that's happening to this movie too. And that is understandable. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't in our biggest theater, so we may have not gotten the full painful effect of it. But you could still tell this is probably a really fucking annoying movie if you're in a really loud theater.
Yeah.
Thank God this wasn't made for IMAX.
Oh, no.
The Dark Knight Rises score gave me a headache. And not the first Dark Knight, I mean, in IMAX, gave me a headache because it was so loud. My brother went to see Man of Steel in IMAX and said he didn't even enjoy it because it gave him a headache. Imagine this there.
Oh, God.
So, let's talk about Jared Harris for a second before I get into more things about how I hate this movie. I'll balance it out a little bit.
Alright.
In all these really, really terrible horror movies, generally, I mixed it with genuinely there. generally they throw in a good actor in there just so critics have something to like. I think that's why they do it, honestly. And the guy needs some money, I guess, because he's not doing Mad Men anymore. But, and he's really good here, obviously.
Yeah, it's Jared Harris.
Acting's in his blood, first off. And secondly, just because he's great. He's so great, I feel like they plucked him out of a better movie and just kind of threw him into this one, and he didn't know what he was he didn't know where he was. Because this character in general belongs in a better movie. He's got that really... He's in charge, but he's got a sinister quality about him. But not in a really, you know, overpowering way, just in a... He makes you a little uneasy. He's a little too into this. I guess the girl has been getting some praise, the girl from Bates Motel, that's basically... I don't know about the rest. I only saw the first season of Bates Motel, and I don't remember, but if she was even in the first season. But she's basically like if Christina Ricci was trying to do Kristen Stewart, is what she reminded me of. I guess I can't complain about her. I'll complain about everybody else, but I don't want to bore you. They're probably as bad as you imagine. Not as bad as the leads in Oculus, but...
No.
You know. This Oculus is much better than this anyway.
Definitely.
There is a really interesting scene here where it's like the movie's going to go in a different direction. Where they start to wonder if maybe Jared Harris is a fraud. And maybe everything is some illusion he's come up with and the girl's in cahoots with him. Because there's a... You know what? I'll go into this now before I talk about that. This movie does something really weird right in the middle of it, where you have the girl, you have Sam Claflin, you have the basically couple apparently. The girl is secretly banging Jared Harris, while Sam Claflin is apparently falling in love with the girl they're experimenting on. The only reason we know he's falling in love with her is because the characters say that, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know, he watches her, but... Anyway, so the girl that has the boyfriend of sorts is banging Jared Harris. They also think Jared Harris is banging the girl that they're experimenting on, and this causes all kind of a fuss, and then the one girl gets mad because the guys are fawning over the other girl, but she's banging Jared Harris, so what does she care what they think? And why is she trying to be all high and mighty? But it doesn't matter because that doesn't go anywhere anyway.
Nope.
It's just there for, like, false drama to take up the runtime, I guess. So, anyway, they're all banding together in this one scene. It's only one scene they explore this, and then it never comes back. They're thinking maybe Jared Harris is a fraud, and he is in cahoots with the one girl because she's, like, will do anything he says. So they come up with all these theories as to how what's happening can be fake. And they think about maybe exposing him. But then there's a battling of the whole, one's accusing one doesn't believe it, and so on. And this could have turned into an interesting scene. Before the scene's even over, they fuck it up. What do you think breaks this scene up? I'm gonna tell you. The girl starts loudly screaming. And they never explore the idea of him being a fraud ever again. They just explore the screaming because the movie's too quiet right now. The title is ironic, by the way. You know what? I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that was on purpose. That's the only thing I'll give them the benefit of the doubt of. I think it's gonna storm. The sky's really dark. So, good thing I wasn't scared by this movie, or I'd be scared right now. And here's the thing, is basically what the movie is them doing experiments on her that go wrong. Like, they try to do an experiment and she'll start screaming. Or something will come from out of nowhere and knock the camera over. And for some reason, it's really fucking loud when you accidentally knock the camera over, I guess. But anyway, It was like watching... Imagine watching a scene in a movie, and then the following scenes are you watching alternate takes of that exact scene you just watched. Go in different ways, kind of. That's basically what the movie felt like. It felt like we saw 3 scenes of the movie, and the rest of the movie was alternate versions of those scenes. Which gave it absolutely no progression and complete redundancy. Which completely, I would say, messes with the flow, but that would have to mean that a flow existed in the first place. So, yes. There's also a scene where, if you haven't had enough of this yet, once again, this doesn't lead to anything, it doesn't go nowhere, it's a scene all by itself. It's just there, and then that's all the purpose this scene served. You have Sam Claflin reading something in his room by himself, and the camera just happens to be perfectly placed to where, not the camera he's using, the camera the filmmakers are using, that made the movie. The camera is perfectly placed to where he's on one side of the screen, and the window he's sitting right beside just happens to take up the other half of the screen. I wonder what's gonna happen here. It would be way too cliche if one of the friends ran up with a flashlight to his face and slammed on the window for some cheap jump scare and then ran away, and the scene was totally useless. That wouldn't happen, right? I mean, they'd be smart enough to not do that scene, right? Oh, yeah.
You're watching the wrong movie.
So, yes, that happened as well. That happened... Remember that movie I talked about, Absence?
Yeah.
That scene was in that movie.
Oh.
This is how they are in the Earth's core underneath the barrel. They are so past the bottom of the barrel they can't see it anymore.
Wow.
And the best line of the movie. The best line of the movie is when Claflin is confronting Jared Harris and says, "You know what? I don't think she's possessed. I think you're possessed by your own bullshit." That's exactly what I was telling the movie in my head.
Yes.
So, that's what that movie is. That's pretty much the whole thing. The only thing I didn't tell you was the couple of turns at the end. But it doesn't matter. So, if that's what you're into, if you're into going deaf, and if you're into being bored by going deaf, it's like if you just let a kid scream in your ear because you were tired of telling him to go away, is what watching this movie feels like.
Good way to put it, actually.
Oh, my Jesus Christ. That's what The Quiet Ones is. In a nutshell. Because that's how I end everything, apparently.
Yes, it is.
So, if that's your thing, please, I would love to hear about your positive experience. So even the tools that were in there that would normally eat this shit up were bored.
Yeah,
the one guy said he was asleep. God bless anybody who can sleep through that shit.
Yeah.
But okay.
My head was against the wall the whole time. There's no way that could have ever happened.
You know, right under speaker, though.
Yep.
Okay. On to our next movie now. And here's the thing. Our next movie isn't normally my type of thing.
Nope.
I don't know if I thought it was okay because we had just watched The Quiet Ones, or if the movie's okay. Let's delve into it and we'll see. Our next movie is The Other Woman, with Cameron Diaz and Leslie Mann. And Kate Upton, I guess. She's basically there to be herself.
Yeah.
A brainless face and other body parts. Huge revelation when the credits of this movie were on.
Yeah, no lie.
Because I didn't really know much about it going in. Actually, two things. Number one, Don Johnson's in this movie. Secondly, the bigger one was, Nick Cassavetes made this movie. Which I didn't know at all. I feel like I've had to say this a few times, but I'll say it again. He is not only the son of John Cassavetes and Jenna Rollins, he's also the director of The Notebook, Alpha Dog, my sister's keeper. That's how you know Cameron Diaz, I guess.
Yep.
And she's so lovely. I'm pretty sure there's a few more too.
That's why the dog scene exists. Now it makes total sense.
So, Alpha Dog, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he's been there before.
Exactly.
Okay, and what this movie is, you've probably seen the trailer because for the longest time this trailer was on everything. This trailer has been around for 4 months.
Yes.
Cameron Diaz and the guy from Game of Thrones have this inseparable relationship. It's the perfect, sexy, everything relationship. Like, banging in front of windows in front of the whole city, and both of them have a lot of money, and they have the perfect everything. They've got the chiseled bodies that were just, like, made on God's greatest days, and everything was perfect. So one day he says, well, a pipe burst in my house. I've got to go figure that out because my basement's flooded.
That's no joke. I've had that happen here before.
And she decides she's going to show up at his house and do a sexy plumber thing. I don't know who's ever done that. And of course, Leslie Mann answers the door, and Leslie Mann is his wife. We actually know that in the first scene of the movie, but I guess I did it from Diaz's perspective when I explained it.
Mm.
And yeah, we also get to know that they basically do the here's the how they're polar opposites thing. It starts off with the sexy stuff with Diaz, and then the scene changes to him rolling over in bed, and Leslie Mann's there, and she's got the only thing she was missing was like the facial mask. She has the glasses, and she goes to the bathroom in front of him, and she just rambles on, and annoys the piss out of him, and basically just to show that, you know, when a wife is being a wife, she's annoying, and when she's sexy Cameron Diaz with no worries, everything's great. So people like Game of Thrones guy think. That's why he's the villain of the movie. So basically they form a bond, and then you know all this stuff because of the trailer, but a lot of the stuff is actually revealed rather late.
Yeah.
It's about halfway through the movie when they realize he has a third mistress, at least, that's Kate Upton. And they see her doing her beach thing. And they decide to form an alliance of revenge. And that's where it goes. Here's the thing. This movie is okay. It's perfectly fine. I mean, it's better than okay, really. It's actually very funny and a lot, not all the time, but fairly a good portion of its runtime. But the problem is I think this movie would be terrible if it weren't for the fact that they got Cameron Diaz and Leslie Mann, because their appeal basically is what makes this movie completely, almost. Like, most of the jokes are just from them. It seems like they were just improvising, really. I wouldn't be surprised if they were. Obviously, Leslie Mann's got a backstory in that. And Cameron Diaz obviously has always been appealing ever since she was in The Mask in 1994. 20 years ago. Jesus. But that's the thing. They're pretty much the reason to see the movie, but they're so good in it, I think that's reason enough. Mm-hmm. Especially Leslie Mann. I've always really loved Leslie Mann, and this is probably the most I've ever loved her in a movie. She's got the hilarious bumbling thing down, but she's also, like, very nice to look at. And it's just hilarious through the whole movie. Like, I know some people, she's not everybody's cup of tea, but I've just always found something extremely appealing about her. And I think she's absolutely perfect in this movie and for that role. The quiet ones are in the house. That's okay, you're just gonna jump out and scream at me, aren't you?
Go away, take your bad movie with you.
So, and Cameron Diaz doesn't just do the sexy thing, too. She's also extremely funny and does her thing as well. And she's even appealing in, like, the absolute worst movies. I won't point any fingers or name names, like The Sweetest Thing, for instance. But she's always great, even if the movies are absolutely terrible. but she and Leslie Mann working together were able to elevate this movie, I think, from something that would have just been, I don't know, the trailer apparently was not a good one.
No.
But it's much better than the trailer would lead you to believe. It's worth noting a few things. This movie is particularly dirty for PG-13. It's, to my understanding, it's on appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's some sexual content in there that kind of goes a long way for PG-13. And there's also a particular scene that really stands out where, towards the beginning, Cameron Diaz is trying to get Leslie Mann out of her building because she's making a scene. And she's basically saying that she doesn't care. Clearly, plain as day, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember if this was the actual line, but this is what I'm talking about. She says, "I don't fucking care." Plain as day she says that. Her mouth says that.
Mm-hmm.
The audio says, "I don't flippin' care." So this is clearly on appeal. So much so they don't actually let any fucks fly. So the sexual content must have been enough for them to. This is barely on the cusp of PG-13.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I find interesting. We basically did 2 movies in a row that did that. Because as bad as it is, The Quiet Ones kind of does push that envelope as well. Now the problem with this is, the main problem with this movie is its length. Because even though I'm pretty sure this was revealed in the trailer too, when they finally decide to do the big revenge thing, which is he's involved with he's stealing money from big companies or something, where he's supposedly investing or something. And they're going to out him for that. By the time we get to that, it doesn't really feel necessary.
No.
Because when they so much as introduce that he's involved with these companies, it's really late in the movie. If they had introduced it earlier and it just kind of gradually popped up every now and then built up to that would make more sense. But this whole plot point that makes up the entire last half hour, with them going to the Bahamas and doing all that, seemed to almost just kind of come from out of nowhere. If it wasn't in the trailer, it would have come from out of nowhere. But I mean, regardless of that, it's still fine. They really help in keeping it afloat. As far as the revenge stuff goes, when they start doing that, it kind of goes into a cliche territory that they seem to be avoiding for the most part. Mm-hmm. But they do, obviously they give him laxatives, and there's a scene that's, numerous movies have done this, but I think the poster child is the scene in Dumb and Dumber with Jeff Daniels. They basically do that scene again. And there is, I don't know how many people saw this movie, but Jeff Franklin, who was the creator of Full House, made a really dirty movie in 1999 called Love Stinks with French Stewart and Bridget Wilson. It's a stupid-ass movie, but it's really funny if you can find it. It's a guilty pleasure. And they take a joke right out of that movie where they put hair remover in his shampoo. And that just felt, that whole revenge segment felt like recycled stuff. John Tucker Must Die was brought up to us.
Yes.
That portion also kind of fits into that area. But and the girls banding together, that whole thing. You could say the whole plot, kind of, but this movie is much more appealing than John Tucker Must Die, I promise.
Yeah.
John Tucker Must Die is kind of the butt of jokes now.
Indeed.
But, this movie is okay, and I think definitely the crowd it's aimed at will like it really well. If I thought it was okay, I'm pretty sure the crowd it's meant for will love it.
Oh yeah.
The people in there seem to take to it. Yeah, so I would see, I mean, for me personally, I would see it just for Cameron Diaz and Leslie Mann, especially Leslie Mann, but I'd say the people it's meant for will like most aspects of it, even the cliche. So like I said, I don't think anybody's seen Love Stinks, so it may not be a recycled joke to them, but it was to me because I've seen that movie. So, yeah. I wish Don Johnson had more scenes. He only has like 2 scenes. The very beginning and the very end. But you gotta make the most of your Don Johnson when you got it. Thank you, Tarantino.
Yes, indeed.
Alright, our next movie is a movie I don't think was supposed to have a wide release initially. But unfortunately, a tragic event made people want to see it, and I guess studios thought they could make money off of it. This is Paul Walker's last completed movie, and it's called Brick Mansions. Which, you hate that title for some reason.
I don't like the title, I just don't. It makes sense after seeing the movie, though.
I had no idea what this movie was even about when we walked into it.
Nope.
I was just like, okay, so, it's Paul Walker, and he is apparently an undercover cop that just happens to drive fast cars again. Go figure. The casting director really worked hard on that one.
Hey, at least his name wasn't Brian.
Yeah, I don't even remember his name in this.
Damien, I believe?
Yeah, that was it, because I thought it was a weird name for a hero.
Yeah, I thought so too.
But anyway.
That might have been the point.
When we first see him, I was thrown off because he has black hair and green eyes. Obviously, Paul Walker was known for his blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yep.
I'll say it as a straight guy. His stunning blue eyes. But then we learn after the scene that he's undercover. He washes out the black dye and he's wearing green contacts. It's an undercover thing. I don't know. Paul Walker still looks like Paul Walker, whether he's got black hair or not. But,
yes.
I guess, drug dealers and weapons dealers don't know that. Actually, the start of this movie does not involve Paul Walker at all. We're introduced to the other guy first. The guy I like to call French John Bernthal.
Yes.
If he were a stunt guy. The start of this movie is this epic fucking chase scene. It's a foot chase scene. And like you pointed out, it does feel like this movie kind of borrowed from The Raid a little bit.
Yes.
But there's just this, I expected this just to be some low budget, should have been straight to DVD movie. But this opening scene is fucking wild. This guy can just obviously he was a stunt guy. He's in like those District 12 or 13 or whatever movies. And he was a stunt guy on like The Transporter and stuff. And he can just fling himself around. It's obvious he was Jason Statham's stunt guy. Probably. I don't know. All I know is he was a stunt guy on the Transporter movies. He can just fling himself through windows and off of fire escapes and through on top of buildings and escape fucking grenades. This whole scene was set up to be something that was more than just some straight-to-DVD movie. It's set up to be a really hardcore action movie.
Definitely.
And while unfortunately the movie can't escape, it was kind of like we talked about with 13 Sins last year, it can't really escape that feel of being a more or less kind of minor movie. It tends to make up for that with the spectacular action scenes. Because, and they go one right after the other. And it doesn't, there's three action scenes, one right after the other. The movie's only 90 minutes, if that. It's 85 minutes, which is really fucking short nowadays. But it keeps it from being redundant because they mix it up at least. Because we have our first action scene, which is this epic foot chase through the whole thing, the whole town, off the top of the buildings and through the windows and through the apartments and all that. Then the second scene is Paul Walker in this gun battle that ends up with him on the trunk of a car, hanging on for dear life. It's not even a car chase. It's just Paul Walker chasing a car by himself, which ends in a really awesome way, by the way.
Definitely.
And then the third action scene is an actual car chase. So they do constant action, but it doesn't feel redundant.
No, it feels right in place.
I feel bad for not knowing. I don't know who the director is, but the writer is Luc Besson, who did The Fifth Element and Leon and all those other movies we talked about when The Family and 3 Days to Kill came out. Which I didn't know until the credits came up. He also is doing Lucy with Scarlett Johansson.
Yes.
He is busy. He's going to have 3 movies this year.
We have trailers for Lucy right now, but it's not on anything that I'm aware of.
And it was, okay, sometimes it's a little over-stylized. Like this, they do a lot of the Tony Scott zoom ins and zoom outs. God rest him, but he zoomed in and out a lot. And we do a lot of like really stylish shots. There's even a couple of scenes where we get fucking replays. Like the action scene will happen and then we see it again from like a different angle. But it's all good. The plot, I guess I should talk about that. You probably don't know that because nobody really seems to know this movie. What happens is there's this section of the town called Brick Mansions, and it's like 2016 or 16 or 18. I couldn't tell if that was a 6 or an 8 to be honest.
Yeah.
But crime has gotten so horrifically bad that they have basically built a wall to keep the more or less urban crime stuff on one side of the town and the good part of the town on the other side. It reminds me of something, and I can't put my finger on it. It sounds so familiar, though. But regardless, you know what I'm talking about. But the problem is basically the person that runs Brick Mansions is this villain named Tremaine Alexander, played by the RZA. Who is fucking as cool as you could possibly be in this movie, by the way.
Completely agreed.
All he does as a villain is sit up in his lair and cut peppers. He's constantly eating he's constantly making vegetarian food. We never actually see him eat it. He's just constantly making it. He's constantly in this own little kitchen he's made for himself. But at the same time, he's one of those villains that doesn't fuck around. Like, he kills dudes when he has to. Rarely does he make a threat, and when he does make a threat, he means it. So much so that he has armed a bomb, funnily enough by accident, that's going to go off in 15 hours. But on top of that, he's got a rocket. And his line, he basically negotiates with Paul Walker, and it doesn't go very well. So he talks about he chains the one guy's girlfriend to the rocket. And when he's talking about referring to negotiating, he says, "Who needs a rocket scientist when you got a rocket?"
Yeah, boy.
Which is exactly the kind of line I would expect in this kind of movie. So that just made it even better.
That's true.
That's the thing. You gotta expect what kind of movie this is, to really appreciate it. Because it's got a sense of humor about itself.
Definitely.
Like, there's this, it knows what kind of movie it is. There's this really absurdly funny scene where they both get arrested. He's infiltrating like he did in Fast and Furious 6. He's getting himself arrested. And he's in the back of the van, and he and the guy escape. And they literally start to fight over who's going to get in the van. Like, Paul Walker goes to get in the van, the guy stops him, they fight. The other guy goes to get into the van, he stops him, they fight again. Paul Walker tries to get in. And it's this ongoing thing like 3 different times. And it's played for comedy. They know how ridiculous a scene like this is. But it all worked for me, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not like a fantastic, like I said, it never escapes that feeling like a minor, should have been DVD movie.
Mm.
But it's really good in that sense. And, by the way, I couldn't help but laugh when they were first explaining the RZA's character to us, and they say he rules Brick Mansions with an iron fist. Because he's the man with the iron fist. He made that movie, too.
I love the Wu-Tang posters in the background, too. That was nice.
Man with the Iron Fist is a really bad movie, but I hear he and Eli Roth got really fucked over by the studio, so I'll let them go. I guess that's another thing worth noting, that another portion of this plot is not only does Paul Walker have to go in and stop the bomb, but he has a vendetta because it's been reported that Tremaine killed Paul Walker's dad. So it's I gotta do business, but I also want revenge thing. There's this side story where he's with, who was that old guy?
Could not tell.
Wow, they never told us that, did they?
No.
They might have subtly, I don't know. He's friends with this old guy who basically says, he wants the old guy to quit smoking, and the old guy says, well, if you don't take revenge on your father's death. Maybe he's his grandpa. They don't really say that,
It's
though.
possible.
Maybe we're supposed to use the clues, like the context clues, I guess. But anyway, that guy will stop smoking if he doesn't take violent revenge on Tremaine Alexander. That's basically the deal. It's that kind of movie.
Yeah, it is.
You just have to keep telling yourself that. Once again, a PG-13 movie that I don't know if it was supposed to be or not. Because the very first death scene in this movie is, it's two guys, and they're guards outside the building. And when they get infiltrated, one of them gets stabbed in the throat, and the other gets a headshot. But there's no blood in this scene. He basically gets stabbed in the throat, but we see him bloodlessly get stabbed in the throat, and then he just drops dead. And then the guy gets shot in the head, and it apparently happens so fast before we can even see any blood. His head is so far back from the hit. So they really heavily edited this to get that PG-13, apparently. Because apparently this movie was supposed to be a lot more violent than we saw. Rosa kills a couple of people, too, that might have been bloodier than initially we saw. Is there somebody you want to mention is in this movie?
Robert Malay's in this movie. Yeah, he is. Kurgan is back.
Because I had to look at you and say, is that who I think it is? Because it sure looks like him. Right off. Basically redoing his fight scene from Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
Was that a Game of Shadows he was in?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, so we're back to Jared Harris. Right?
Yes. Back to good movies, Jared Harris. We missed you.
Yeah. So, yeah, he fucking rocked in Game of Shadows.
Yeah, he did.
So, yes. So, yeah, I would, if that's your thing, I would check out Brick Mansions. It probably won't be in theaters very long.
No.
But so I'd check it out if you can, but it's the movie I would probably choose this weekend if I were choosing. Depending on who you are. I'd recommend The Other Woman more to women than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Or Leslie Mann fans like myself. So, yeah. Another interesting thing about Brick Mansions is the ending. I'm not going to tell you anything, but the ending raises some interesting dilemmas for the hero. Mm-hmm. And I found that really interesting. Because you would think a movie like this, because the way what the plot is moving towards, I was thinking, shouldn't a particular character be thinking something right now? Like, maybe this isn't a good idea? Mm-hmm. But the movie actually brings that into play. So, and obviously the hero, it gives the hero, like, real, like, hardcore decisions to make. And I found it really interesting that it actually took that path. Instead of just being, like, the, fuck it, let's blow it, we got a bomb in this movie, let's blow it up kind of movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, yeah, I would totally check out Brick Mansions if you can. I'll bet you anything it's getting terrible reviews. I bet you anything it is.
I bet you it doesn't do anything money-wise in the box office this week.
Yeah. So, but don't pay attention to that. I would check it out if you like that. So, we're going totally different now.
Yes.
Our next movie is Wes Anderson's masterpiece. I'm not saying masterpiece in general, I'm saying it's Wes Anderson's greatest achievement so far.
Yes.
The Grand Budapest Hotel. Which I was the reviews for this came out. It came out like over a month ago. And the reviews for this were coming out, and I was so scared.
Yeah.
Because I thought this movie was going to be so overrated when I saw it. I didn't even want to look at I didn't even want to see headlines that said Grand Budapest Hotel is like amazing, because I was just afraid if I just read one more, I was like, this movie's going to be, I'm going to think this movie's so overrated, and I'm so afraid that's going to happen. No, this movie deserves all the praise it's getting.
Absolutely.
This movie is fantastic from literally from beginning to end. I can't think of anything I don't like about it. I say there's nothing I can think of that I don't like about it, but it's not a masterpiece. There's, okay. I've confused myself now. Let me start at the beginning. This movie starts itself off as a very interesting unraveling of stories. This is really, really interesting how this plays out.
Definitely.
The movie starts with a girl walking into a cemetery, and she's holding a book. And the gravestone is one of these big ones, like a bust, and it has a whole bunch of keys on it. And the name on it just says author. And it's obviously a bust of Tom Wilkinson, because we know what Wilkinson looks like.
Yeah.
And we see that the book she's holding is a book by his character. All we know him as is author. And the book is called The Grand Budapest Hotel, which the story of the movie is inside. It's one of those movies. But instead of that, we cut to Wilkinson himself back when he was alive as Wilkinson. And now he's telling us the story directly through the fourth wall, despite the fact that his grandchild is annoying him.
Yeah, that's great.
So now the story is continuing to unfold, and now we're being told the story through the young version of Wilkinson, who is Jude Law. And Jude Law is staying in this hotel where he meets a concierge that's Jason Schwartzman, because you can never, ever, ever have a good Wes Anderson movie without Jason Schwartzman.
Correct.
Oh shit, he's not in the Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, wow.
Okay, you can't have a Wes Anderson movie generally without Jason Schwartzman.
That's true, he's not.
So, okay, man, I'm fucking this all up. Okay, I should just not talk about Wes Anderson ever again.
Focus.
Okay, so, as the story continues to unravel, he's hanging out with Jason Schwartzman, and we see an old guy in the middle of the lobby just hanging out there, and he looks really sad and alone. And Jude Law is desperate to know, Jude Law / Wilkinson is desperate to know who this guy is. And he's the owner of the Grand Budapest Hotel. So we go over and it's F. Murray Abraham. And they basically talk in the little sauna or whatever that was. And we're unraveling some more. We're now being told the story from F. Murray Abraham's perspective as a child. So we're finally, and this is the story we are being told. This is where it all begins. For real this time. F. Murray Abraham decides to tell Jude Law his story through over dinner. And of course it's like, do we have time to go through this over dinner? And he's like, yes, we have 3 courses to go through. And I believe when we get to the end of the movie they're finishing dessert, which is really a great little thing. Or no, they were getting ready to have dessert.
Yeah, they haven't had dessert yet.
Yeah, because that comes into play.
Yep.
But anyway, after all of this, the real story is about this legendary concierge played by Ray Fiennes. Monsieur Gustave, I believe was his name. And I agree with most critics. I never knew Ray Fiennes would have had this kind of performance in him.
No.
Because he's either like the psychotic character he was in Bruges, or the really dark character, sinister character he was in the Harry Potter movies, or he's the stoic, epic love story hero in The English Patient, or he's the sick as fuck Nazi in Schindler's List. This performance is pure comedic brilliance.
Yes.
Whether it be his timing and his delivery and just how he balances vulgarity with elegance. How one minute he's this refined gentleman and the next he's like saying fucking cock and shit. And he basically sleeps with every woman he comes into contact with. There's a great scene where he's talking to Adrian Brody about Tilda Swinton. Tilda Swinton was Adrian Brody's mother, who is now dead. And he's like, so you were with my mother? And he's like, well, your mother and I were friends. And he's like, you slept with my mother? He's like, I sleep with all my friends. And he gets decked for it. And that's a really funny scene, the way that plays out.
Made everybody in the entire theater laugh.
But that's the plot of the movie, is Tilda Swinton, who's practically unrecognizable because she's basically playing a very old woman, turns up dead. And it's basically kind of an old-fashioned murder mystery, kind of, from there. It's a whole bunch of other things, but it basically stems from this old-fashioned murder mystery kind of thing. What was that author's name? Agatha Christie. Like something she would write. And the thing is this movie is basically known for its epic cast list. Apparently some people complain about that. It's basically kind of let's see where we can fit in the cameo thing. But every character seemed to have a purpose, despite how stacked the cast is.
Exactly.
You have, like, well, obviously we went through, we have Ray Fiennes and Wilkinson, Jude Law, F. Murray Abraham. You have Adrian Brody, who's basically the villain of the movie, who loves to refer to Ray Fiennes by gay slurs. Because I love... That's another one of those great things. Brody's character really helps that, and the painting really helps... that great balance this movie has of elegance and vulgarity. They kind of... It's mostly elegant, but those bursts of vulgarity just seem to come from out of nowhere, and it's hilarious when they happen. Adrian Brody has a henchman played by Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is basically his Anton Chigurh, all the way down to taking off his boots to make sure he doesn't make noise when he creeps up on you.
He looks like Butch Patrick.
But further on, we have F. Murray Abraham keeps hinting at this love story he had, this tragic love story, because he keeps breaking down and crying, and he keeps saying, I don't want to talk about it. And it's shrouded in mystery through the whole movie, and they played with that for comedic effect, too. Since he's a child, obviously, his love interest is played by Saoirse Ronan, who is this baker in, like, this bakery out of, like, a fat guy's wet dream. It's like just this perfect place you can possibly imagine, which we'll get into the look of the movie in a minute. Edward Norton as a cop who got a laugh from the people in the theater. I really like the audience we saw this with.
Completely agreed.
It's one of those movies where the comedy feels like it should be going over people's heads, but everybody in the theater seemed to seem to be Wes Anderson fans.
Definitely.
You have Jeff Goldblum, who's basically he was like the lawyer of the family. He had a couple of purposes. It was, when he showed up as the lawyer of the family, Fiennes was surprised. Harvey Keitel, who I didn't recognize at first because he's bald.
Looks like Alan Arkin in the movie.
They kind of sound similar too. He plays a prisoner, a crucial prisoner. Along with Schwartzman and Tilda Swinton, Brody, and all the other regulars, you have Owen Wilson and Bill Murray, who you also can't seem to have a Wes Anderson movie without, sometimes. They just have really brief scenes as other, like... there are people that work at other hotels that, like, they're all connected, which is a crucial scene. A really funny butler. The downfall is that he's too honest, who is played by, I heard him pronounce his name, Matthew Amalric, I think is how you say it. You know him from The Diving Bell and the Butterfly and Chicken with Plums and Cosmopolis. Or Quantum of Solace, I guess. Leah Sadu plays a maid.
Yeah.
Just recognizable faces everywhere. And when they're doing the big, all the concierges are contacting each other, Bob Balaban and Fisher Stevens were in there.
Yes.
There's a myth going around, I don't know how true it is. Supposedly, I don't know, but supposedly George Clooney is hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
But I didn't see him, and I don't know, it's not on his IMDb page either. I don't know.
He would have been one of the concierges if I had to guess.
I don't know if that's a myth or not, but I didn't see him. Now about this movie, now that we've gotten the monumental cast out of the way, this movie feels like its own world. Like, at the same time, obviously, it's Wes Anderson without a doubt. So much, at first I was almost distracted. I was like, oh my god, this is so Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
I almost can't take it. But this movie manages to make its own world. It's like a moving pop-up book is what this movie looks like. Just with the way these sets are. And it's also almost like it's set entirely within the confines of the inside of a snow globe. Without the falling snow. Sometimes there's snow, but most of the time it's like indoors. But regardless, you know what I mean. The inside of the hotel reminded me, I don't know how many people are familiar with this movie. There is, I think it's from the 60s, a Jerry Lewis movie called The Ladies' Man. And it was infamous because its big set piece was this hotel that he works at. And it's just this gigantic, massive set that's just like I don't even know what to compare it to about how big it was. The inside of the hotel reminded me of the Jerry Lewis movie, The Ladies Man, which is quite a compliment. And speaking of Jerry Lewis, another thing this movie accomplished, which I think is probably one of its greatest accomplishments, you could say this is part of Anderson's directing and his impeccable writing. It's based off other works, but it's a Wes Anderson tone all in itself.
Yeah.
How old-fashioned the comedy of... Obviously, it just has an old-fashioned feel in general, but especially the comedy aspect of it. It felt like something Peter Sellers or the Marx Brothers would have been in. And just... It just felt like something you don't see anymore.
No.
And it was great. I mean, obviously, yeah, the big complaint now is you have old-fashioned comedy, but now all you have is kind of vulgarity. This movie perfectly brings those together.
Yes.
Because it never feels like, when the movie gets a little dirty at times, it never really feels gratuitous, because it adds to the comedy, to the kind of setting you have this in. Let me just say, a crucial part of this movie involves a painting called Two Lesbians Fingering. That gets quite the reaction of Adrian Brody, too.
Yeah.
But there's just such an... I keep saying elegance, but what other word can you put to this movie?
Brilliance, personally.
And it's just it's just got such an imaginative... I can only imagine how much went into the production design of this movie. It felt like every single scene of this movie, every single shot of this movie, some really, really hard, specific work went into. Like, this movie was just absolutely, down to the absolute smallest detail, crafted exactly as it was supposed to be. And it's able to do kind of that thing where the comedy in it has like a really silly vibe to it, like the Peter Sellers slapstick. But despite the slapstick, the whole movie has such a sophistication to it. I was gonna say sophisticated feel. I just went with sophistication to it.
Alright.
And it adds, and the foul language and all that just kind of adds a bite to it.
Yeah.
Like, it just when the movie feels like it's really innocent and everything's, like, perfect, they throw in that little wrench where somebody will say fuck or cock or make a sexual remark.
Kevin Kline's missing from this movie so much.
Yeah.
He totally belongs in the Wes Anderson universe.
So, yeah, there's not enough good things to say about this movie.
No.
It's obviously one of the best of the year. The first half of this year has been spectacular. The second half of this year has a lot to live up to.
We're just going to get screwed this year, the rest of the year, because it seems like we start off way too hot right now.
From June on, it's just going to suck. Now on to something totally different.
For your Monty Python reference for the day.
And now for something completely different. Something that people will probably have various interests in seeing.
Yeah.
People will be wanting to see this movie for a lot of different reasons. This just depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, of course, talking about Under the Skin. Jonathan Glazer's controversial movie that came out of TIFF with a really wild reaction. People didn't know what the fuck to think. It's basically been more... Obviously, most people agree the art house crowd is the one that's going to really take to it.
Yeah.
And regular audiences are kind of just going to be... have no idea.
I may not waste your time.
Well, that's the thing, though. Not to undermine regular audiences, because it's not so much that... it's not so much that there is something to understand. It's basically... I guess I'll get... Since the movie's artsy, I guess I'll get all artsy on you. Basically, the mystery and the unanswered questions of this movie are basically a blank canvas for your imagination to go crazy with.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is.
Best way to put it.
The plot is really simple, which I think is why the movie has this artistic feel, because it's almost too simple.
Mm.
There's something else to this movie besides how basic its plot is, because it's got the whole how it's technically made is what it's basically. A lot of people say Scarlett Johansson's performance and body is the star of this movie. I would say, and I mean, not to say that, you know, Scarlett Johansson's body is not front and center, nor is that in any way a complaint whatsoever.
Nope.
I would never, ever, ever complain about Scarlett Johansson taking all of her clothes off. I'm just saying, I think this movie's technical aspects are the real star of it.
Yeah.
Even though she is great in it. Because this movie, I mean, it kind of has this 2001-esque start. Obviously, she's coming out of space because she's basically an alien that comes down to Earth, takes a human form, takes just a random dead drifter's clothes, and walks around Scotland picking off hitchhikers in the most interesting way possible. If you want to call it picking off.
Yeah.
What she basically does is she uses her Scarlett Johansson body to lure men back to her apartment. Easy to believe.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to say too much. I don't know who's already seen this. It's been out for a while now. We just saw it last week. What happens here is, this is what I was about to go into, so I can go into it now. The most interesting thing about this movie, whether you hate it, or whether you love it, or whether you just don't know what the fuck to think, I guarantee you're in one of those three categories. This is unlike anything anybody's ever seen before.
Yeah.
This movie is so out there. The wildest imagination had to have come up with it. And there's a lot of, it might test the patience of a lot of film goers, because it's one of those movies where while it does have those great moments of, I don't know what's happening, but I've never seen anything like this before in my life, it does also have a lot of those shots that just kind of linger for a long time and not really much on anything. Depending on who you ask, a lot of people will say, well, you know, they lingered on Scarlett for about 5 minutes, and as the one shot progressed, I saw like this in her or something. I don't know. That didn't happen to me, but it can happen. It can happen.
Yeah.
So somebody's not full of shit if they tell you they saw something in a lingering shot. Basically, what came to mind from, and I know I'm basically kind of simplifying it here, but to describe it to somebody who, that's the great thing about this movie. It's almost impossible to describe. That I'm doing my best here.
It's like watching Cirque du Soleil. It's really hard to describe what you're seeing.
The thing here is, the way I would describe it is, imagine if Gus Van Sant and Terrence Malick worked together to make a horror movie.
I can see that.
It has the artsiness of a Malick movie. It has the long, lingering shots of a Van Sant movie. And it's got a really eerie, dread-inducing feel to it. Because even though we all know Scarlett Johansson as the extremely appealing blonde that we all love to see and all that, when she's just ominously driving around in her van, she's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
In a really effective way, which obviously goes to her performance.
She changes her voice up too.
That she can shed Scarlett Johansson and be... Nobody in this movie gets a name.
No.
When the cast list rolls, it's just actors' names. And apparently a lot of the, I guess, I don't know how famous she is around the entire world, but supposedly the hitchhikers, not the ones that got in the van, obviously, but the hitchhikers that would walk up to her window and she'd, like, ask for directions, apparently weren't actors and didn't know that she was Scarlett Johansson, nor that she was making a movie. And she just drove up to them and asked them for directions, and they filmed it. But then again, I can kind of tell obviously she doesn't have the blonde hair. She's got like the chopped up black hair. You could almost kind of tell, maybe this was just me, you could kind of tell a couple of the guys she stopped and asked directions for, they almost looked like they were saying in their heads, wow, she really looks like somebody.
Yeah.
Obviously they did that for authenticity, of course. And there's gotta be, if they really did do that, maybe that's just something that got out that's not true, but if they really did do the driving up to random people who didn't know they were in a movie thing and didn't know they were talking to Scarlett Johansson thing, there's gotta be unused takes somewhere, people going, oh my fucking god.
Like when Knoxville reveals that he's the grandpa, Irving's husband.
Maybe the hair is enough to disguise her to the public.
It's the face, though. The face is a dead giveaway.
Like I said, they could just say in their heads, wow, she really looks like it, and then their mind just goes elsewhere. But there's some really great shots in this movie, and it makes you wonder how the fuck they got these shots. Like the opening shot where she has like the dead drifter woman and she's taking her clothes. This is done with them as like black. We can still see them, but they're kind of also black silhouettes, and it's on this entirely white background. We don't know exactly where this is. If it's like in whatever she came down from space in, I don't know. It's been getting compared to the Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie.
I can see that.
And then these scenes where she takes them. Okay, here's the thing. I'll explain it as this far. There's a big reveal halfway through the movie that's really chilling.
Yes.
But what happens is they go back to her little apartment, or whatever it is, and it's just blackness. It is just pure blackness with a reflective... The floor is black, but it's reflective.
I thought it was a pool.
Well, here's the thing, though, is it's like solid floor, and she's literally luring them. She's walking as she's taking her clothes off, and they follow her, and they take their clothes off, and then suddenly it's like the floor turns to liquid.
Yeah.
And they just sink into oblivion. And she just goes on her way. She can walk back over it. Back in the van, and on to the next person. This is just an ongoing thing until the reveal. And we don't know, and it's not really explained why this is happening and what the purpose is. It just is what's happening. And another anonymous figure in the movie is creepy motorcycle guy that was assisting her in all this, that would drive around and basically pick up the pieces. But then halfway through the movie, it takes a turn. Actually, it's closer to the end. It's like maybe with maybe a quarter of the movie left. She basically decides that she wants to try being human. So she's going to do human things. Like, she tries to... I guess the two basic human things, according to Jonathan Glazer. She tries to eat cake and have sex. Apparently this is based on a novel from like 15 years ago. But apparently it's just as abstract as the movie is. Apparently it took Glazer forever to get this movie made. That's why he hasn't... This is his first movie since Birth. His three... I don't know if he's made any more movies, but the three I know of for sure. He made this, Birth, and Sexy Beast. Needless to say, he's diverse.
Yes.
He's got range. And then it kind of turns into... It basically kind of turns into a tragedy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very... This is just one of those movies you have to see to believe. Nobody can really, truly explain it to you. And like it's like being inside a nightmare. Is what some of those scenes felt like. Which, if you know me, know I've always loved movies like that. Like the this is a totally different kind of it, but the movie Orson Welles did with Anthony Perkins, The Trial, was basically supposed to feel like you were trapped in a nightmare. It was based off a Kafka story, of course. The whole story was supposed to feel like the character was trapped inside a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. This movie kind of has that same feel to me, only in a much more eerie way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so... And it's just got that whole surreal feel to it. So... Like, so much so that you're watching the movie and you're not even sure... Like, you can't just believe your eyes of what happens in this movie. So yeah... I mean, I like it. I like movies like that. Mm. If they do it right, I like movies like that are... They just set up this really... They just take you on this visual little journey, I guess. Mm. And your mind kind of has to just nobody has answers. It's just all a complete mystery that you can basically do your own thing with. Like, if something happens and you want to believe it's for a certain reason, the movie leaves it open for you to believe that all you want. So, yeah. So, if that's what you want, or once again, if you are in this for the fact that Scarlett Johansson takes all of her clothes off in it, you won't be disappointed in that either. So
I'm not trying to find it at this point, though.
Yeah,
Art house theaters are probably the only place they'll still have it.
A24 actually, I guess there was a huge outburst over this. A24 originally was not going to release it on Blu-ray because the release was so small. But I don't know what happened. I guess they were originally going to do like you could buy it digitally online, and that's how Under the Skin was going to be distributed. But they've since backed down. It's going to be on Blu-ray, so it'll be out there soon enough. That's probably not too far off because it's been out for a while now. It'll probably come out around the same time as Enemy, which is a couple of months because it's the same studio and the same. We'll review Enemy later. Our last movie.
A weird way to end.
I didn't really care enough to really talk about this movie much because I didn't think we were going to really have anything to say. Our last movie is the documentary Bears that came out last year, but we had so many movies on the last video we bumped it to this week.
Came out last year.
Week. So, we just up and watched Bears. It's only like an hour long.
Yeah, it's like super short.
It's like an hour 15.
There's a lot of trailers on it, though.
And it's one of those Disneynature movies where they did. This whole thing started when they took Earth, which was a documentary from like 2 years before it came out in the U.S. And they put James Earl Jones' voice on. I forget who did the UK version, but then they did Oceans, and then they've done a few others. They did African Cats, Chimpanzee,
which we actually was the last one we saw theatrically.
Yeah. For some reason, I eventually watched African Cats. I guess because Samuel Jackson was the narrator.
Bears continues the narrator train.
Pierce Brosnan did Oceans.
Yeah.
And
there's Monkey Kingdom coming out next year.
And Tim Allen did Chimpanzee.
Yes.
For Bears, we got John C. Reilly. Which is fitting, because he's kind of like a bear. You could just, he's a friendly bear, you know?
He's also Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah.
So that makes perfect sense.
So, I think is much better than, say, the scene in Cyrus when he compares himself to Shrek.
Totally agreed.
But anyway, I just referenced Cyrus while talking about bears. Cyrus is an R-rated Duplass Brothers movie.
Yeah, it is.
With him and Jonah Hill battling for Marissa Tomei.
Good movie, check it out.
Bears is a G-rated documentary where John C. Reilly, they basically sat in a booth and they made him watch a bear documentary and put voices with it to entertain children. Because that's what these movies are. What Disneynature does is, this one actually did it a lot more so than the other movies did. Mm. Like, James Earl Jones obviously played it serious. I think Samuel Jackson was relatively serious. Pierce Brosnan, I think, is incapable of being anything but serious. No, it's an Matador, of course.
Mamma Mia.
And surprisingly, Tim Allen was really good when he did Chimpanzee.
Yeah, definitely.
John C. Reilly's narration, I don't blame him because I'm pretty sure all this was written.
Yeah.
This one seems aimed a lot more at children.
Yeah.
Which obviously, you know, you can't fault them because you're Disney and you're gonna release a documentary for children to basically learn about these animals and nature in general.
Exactly.
Which is why they're doing the Disneynature thing. Obviously, you do tend to want to make it children oriented, so they'll stay interested. Apparently, Bears actually has really good reviews. It's got like a 90 on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's doing decent business too, to be honest.
The problem with me, though, I'm not saying I would have liked it better if there wasn't narration. Because I'm not saying I don't care for learning about shit. I'm just saying, for some reason for me, most documentaries I go in and out of when I'm watching them. Sometimes I care, sometimes I just don't.
Yeah.
And I think if this was just, okay, what Disneynature does, I don't know how. I mean, they show you a little bit during the credits of all their movies, but they get this magnificent footage. I don't know how they get these incredible shots of all these places safely. But, wasn't there one of these where they had like an in memoriam to one of their cameramen? I don't remember. But
I believe so, but I'm not positive.
Somehow, some way, they get magnificent footage for these movies. And it doesn't seem to, with how good, I'm not saying it needs to just be silent shots. It's not fucking Koyaanisqatsi or Sensar or anything, but, it just doesn't seem to fit. You have, like, how you have these magnificent shots, and then you have, like, in the next scene you have John C. Reilly voicing a bear that can't get a clam open, and so he's doing the, hey Ma, can you help me kind of voice thing. That was weird to me. I think that was just him maybe improv. He got bored in the booth, and it's like, they didn't give me anything here in the script. I think I'm just gonna fuck around a little bit. So
it's clear a lot of this stuff was his own work, and it wasn't part of the script.
So, honestly, my mind started to drift a lot while watching Bears. My first thought was, the movie opens, and it's this bear, a female bear named Skye. I've been watching a lot of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. lately. I gotta make sure I'm saying the right name, I'm not confused. Okay. The bear's name is Skye.
Yes.
And she has 2 cubs, a boy and a girl. The girl was Amber, and the boy was... It was something adventurous sounding. Like Scout or something.
It was Scout.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Okay. If not, we're going to call him that. Because the movie starts with, here's a bear, we're going to call her Skye. So I guess we're just doing shit now. My question was, there's a scene very early in the movie. Once again, I don't know how they get this footage. But God bless them. There's a scene, and John C. Reilly is telling us about how dangerous it is this time of year. Because they have to trek all the way across the winter. They have to go an entire year just trekking until they get to the place they need to be so they can hibernate and not die. And they have to have eaten enough salmon and stuff so she can feed them through the winter. So they don't die too. But one of the first obstacles is an avalanche. In case you didn't see the avalanche, John C. Reilly's voice comes on and says, avalanche. And I was thinking, Skye and her cubs were really close to this avalanche, and he's saying, this is potentially deadly. This is going to be the most dangerous part of their trek. So I got to thinking when I was watching this movie, I got distracted for a good 20 minutes thinking about this.
Yep.
When they make these documentaries, obviously, once again, we started with a fade-in, and he's like, this is a bear, we're going to call her Skye, and we're going to follow her around for a year. Let's say, God forbid, of course, but let's just say Skye and her cubs got taken out by this avalanche. They got claimed by it. Would they just pack up their shit and follow another bear? Like, would it be, oh no, the avalanche has claimed Skye and her cubs. And then it says, like, R.I.P. Skye, R.I.P. Scout, R.I.P. Amber. Fade out. The movie's only been on for 20 minutes. Fade in. This bear's name is Larry. We're gonna follow him around now. Like, how many bears did they go through before they got a successful documentary?
Wow.
I'm just saying...
It's a good point.
I wonder about these things sometimes.
These are things you think about late at night when you're home alone and the power goes out.
Yes. And I also got to thinking about, obviously the point of this movie is they have to go all the way across to wherever it is. But in order to survive, they have to snack on salmon. A shitload of salmon. Like, they have to, like, really fish for it. They can catch it in their mouths when it jumps out of waterfalls. They can, like, when the tide dries up, it's like a buffet, and they just rip the shit out of salmon and just munch on them, and it's just this, it's kind of graphic, actually.
Yeah.
I want so badly for the next Disneynature movie to be us following Sal the salmon. And we follow Sal's great story. It's basically like Finding Nemo without getting lost. We're just following him. And we learn the great life that it is to be a salmon. Because we've followed all kinds of things now. We're following fucking lemurs. So, why not follow salmon now? This movie has to end with, oh hey, there's our friend Sky from the other movie. Oh shit! And then it ends with like Hakuna Matata as the end credit song. They do the whole segment where it's like stock sound screaming, like Wilhelm screams, and it's them like ripping apart the salmon, and we see Sal's family, his whole school just dying in this horrible viscera of just being ripped apart by the bears, because they've got to live too.
The Circle of Life.
And the Circle of Life plays over the end credits. Because we're choosing Lion King songs, I guess.
Apparently.
Throw Why Can't We Be Friends in there. It plays over the credit. The credits play over them being ripped apart by the bears. I would pay to see that movie.
I would too.
We didn't pay to see bears, but I'd pay to see Sal the Salmon's tragic story. And this movie has music cues. It has that fucking song from the Trouble with the Curve trailer that never went away.
I like that song.
I hate that song.
It's Philip's song.
And here's the thing, is they play that song. Now here's the thing. The documentary is just footage and John C. Reilly's voice. That's all they need, really. And then they break into this scene where they start playing that song because they couldn't think of a cliche enough song. So they're playing the song, and it's over a montage of the footage, and the bears, running through the landscapes, and like, yeah, they're really trucking now because we got a montage going on. And what I thought they would have done, maybe this is just a nitpick, but what I would have done if I were making this movie, don't know why that would happen, would be, if you're going to play the song over a montage, play the song over the montage, and then pick up where you left off after this montage.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the song, John C. Reilly's voice comes back. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm listening to this dumbass song. I really don't like this song. John C. Reilly? What's he doing singing? Then he stopped, and the music kept going, and I was sitting there just thinking, okay, when in the song is John C. Reilly's voice going to come back? It's also worth noting, if you want another documentary about this topic, I'd kind of love to see this movie as a companion, played as a double feature with Grizzly Man. Wouldn't you?
Yes.
Oh, God. This is what bears do to survive. This is what bears do when they come in contact with humans. Sorry for that. Whatever. There was also a really, there was also kind of an uncomfortable scene in this movie. Not uncomfortable for the movie, but uncomfortable for how the people made it for me to watch. This was just timing. This has nothing to do with the movie itself, really. You have Sky laying on her back, and you have the two bears like nursing and feeding. Well, it just so happens, it was a mother and two kids on the other side of me, and it just so happened to be timed that when the bears were feeding from their mother, one of the kids says really loud, "Mom, I'm thirsty." Oh, God.
Oh, boy.
Oh, God. So, you know what? That's pretty much the extent of bears. So, yeah, once again, I don't know if Riley's narration always... When he's doing the facts, okay, but I know you have to keep the children entertained, so you gotta make, the bears say and do funny things, but it basically comes off like, when you're a kid and you watch those National Geographic tapes, and you talk over them, like, this is what the monkey's probably saying right now. This monkey's probably saying, fuck you, bitch. So, just stuff like that, only G-rated.
I hope so.
So, yeah. That's what bears is. That's all this review was going to be. I was just going to tell you what Bears was.
Alright.
So, we're finally done. That's another 6 movies down.
So, to recap, like we always do here, basically we're going to throw... I can't even say it without laughing. The quiet ones.
Verdict?
Yeah, Verdict.
Don't watch the quiet ones.
Ever.
And if you do, take some earplugs with you, but the trouble is you'll miss the whole movie.
The Other Woman?
Sure.
It's alright.
Why not?
Yeah. Brick Mansions?
Yeah, I'd check it out before it leaves theaters in a week.
The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, obviously it's the, we'll obviously do our halfway through the year top 10 list.
Yes.
In, the first week of July, probably.
And Under the Skin.
If you're asking me if I liked it, yeah. If you're asking me if I recommend it, I don't know. It depends on who you are.
Buyer beware.
I don't know that I know anybody personally that would like Under the Skin, I'll say that. So, yeah.
And Bears.
Oddly enough, the kids in there were like, there were 2 women towards the front that had 5 kids with them. And they all seemed fine, so if you want to take your kids to it, I think they'll be fine.
They weren't bored enough to get up and run around, so that's a good thing.
And it's short enough to where I don't think it'll bother them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what we got for next week? Next week we are going to finally talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2. 2 different ways. It's going to be in a video, and we're going to do another spoiler alert for it, so that'll be fun. And we've got some other things coming up as well.
I'm going to probably throw Kid Cannabis in there, because I keep hearing things about it.
Sounds like The Railway Man is a possibility.
The Railway Man definitely, because it was supposed to be last week. And probably more.
The Immigrant is coming, it's just not coming yet, so trust me, it will be coming soon.
In a week or 2, yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely have it soon. And Snowpiercer's coming eventually, too.
Yeah, it'll be like in June.
So. Okay, any parting words?
That's it.